Hello, everybody, and welcome to After the Ending. I'm Mike Spring,
And I'm Phil Edwards.
and tonight we are joined by a very special guest, one of the premier comic book writers in the world, none other than Mr. Garth Ennis. Hello, Garth.
Hello, Mike. Phil, good to be here.
Hello.
Glad to have you. You guys have all heard of Garth. I can promise you. He has written and created some of the greatest comics of the last several decades. Some of his biggest, most well-known, The Boys, Preacher, Judge Dredd, Hitman, you name it. He has written it at some point or another. But tonight we're going to start talking about one of his newest projects that we are really excited about, and it is a comic book of Hawk the Slayer. So just to kind of get things started, Garth, just tell our viewers a little bit about the comic. What do they need to know about it? Kind of the basics, if you will.
Okay, so Hawk the Slayer was a British sword and sorcery film released in 1980. It starred John Terry as the hero Hawk and Jack Palance in fine form as Hawk's evil brother Voltan. It's about an hour and a half long. It has production values that you would associate with the budget and era. I saw it at just the right age. It, I suppose, put some sort of hook in me age 11 that I could never quite get rid of. I saw it a couple more times over the years. Kept thinking about it. Whenever people, a few years later, whenever people in the industry, publishers and such, would ask me if there's some franchise I've always wanted to work on, if there'd be something I'd always wanted to bring back, I would stun and stymie them by saying, yep, Hawk the Slayer, see if you can get to that. And so eventually, Rebellion did manage to pick it up, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's... Did you find that many people in the US knew about the Hawk the Slayer? Because when I was talking to Mike about it, he didn't really seem to. It didn't seem to cross the pond that much. It seemed to be. I remember watching it like you when I was a kid. It was one of those ones my friends would have it on VHS or something, or it was on TV, and be all gathered around waiting for Crow to do his thing with the arrows,
right?
See the sword and everything. But yeah, was like the American contingent? Did they know about the property, or did you have to talk to it or?
Probably 1 in 10 people that I've mentioned it to over the years. Over here, it's perhaps as well known for those funny little mentions it gets in Spaced as it is for the actual film, the actual property itself.
I think we in the US we grew up watching Beastmaster.
Right.
We didn't get Hawk the Slayer as much on the reruns over here, but Beastmaster was on like every afternoon. I think you guys got more of Hawk the Slayer. We got more of Beastmaster.
Right. And there's Krull.
Yeah.
There's the funny thing is that I thought that things like Hawk were kind of at the almost the bottom of the barrel, but when you look at this particular genre or subgenre of 70s 80s low budget fantasy, there's stuff that's actually far lower on the totem pole. There's some stuff where it looks like they got a quarry, some bodybuilder, a couple of rubber swords, and maybe a couple of strippers on their weekend up. And went at it, because these are all completely forgettable. It's the Krulls and Hawks and Beastmasters that somehow stick in your memory. Hawk is the one that worked for me.
So, we were talking briefly before we started recording about how this is kind of an after the ending, right? Which is sort of our format of, sort of creating sequels for existing properties. What was your sort of process when you obviously weren't involved in the movie, you just watched it on TV. When you sat down to write it, was it just hey, this is what I want to see happen next, or was there any other, did you have to consult with people? Was there any other existing framework that went into the plotting of it? How did that work?
Not really. It was just me. I ran my ideas past Rebellion, and they said yes. When I sat down to think about what I wanted to do, it was a mixture of things. On the one hand, you had all those things I'd been thinking about for really the guts of 40 years. When you finish watching the film as a kid and you start to wonder. And then other ideas about what I wanted to see in a Hawk the Slayer sequel. And I thought about it and I decided what I didn't want to do was expand it into something unrecognizable. I wanted a Hawk the Slayer sequel that would give me, and therefore fans of Hawk the Slayer, I hope, what they wanted. There's a bad tendency, I sometimes think, to turn these things into massive franchises, to expand the worlds and the casts until they're almost unrecognizable. You hear a line a lot, let's do something new. I want to see something new. And that's fine. It's a good idea. It can lead you to some good places, but it can also lead you to, for instance, the Phantom Menace. That was something new. It was full of new things. On the other hand, look at The Force Awakens, which I think quite nicely manages to show you a lot of the old stuff so that you get that rush of nostalgia with some new characters and situations. I thought that was a good blend. And so when it came to Hawk the Slayer, I thought, let's take the surviving cast, keep them broadly the same. Let's make a couple of alterations to the characters to allow for time and, of course, life after death in the case of Voltan. Let's have a couple of new characters, but let's largely keep the same situations and settings and themes that the movie was so enjoyable for. So let's keep it largely set in these English oak woods that for some reason have a large population of tropical snakes. And let's have these odd piles of skulls showing up at appropriate moments. Let's revisit the Forest of Weir, which is a creepy notion and handled quite well in the film. Let's have another look at the Holy Fortress, which when you look at it isn't really all that holy. It has that nasty Gothic look that the medieval church has when you get into that side of archaic Christianity where it's almost corpse worship. That side of things. So I wanted to expand, but I didn't want to make the thing unrecognizable. That might be the best description of my starting point.
That's great, because I think you got it spot on, where if you're going to do a sequel to something which has like a cult fandom or a big fan base, you have to get that blend, don't you? You have to start off with what people know and then introduce new elements. But we were sent over the first 2 issues of the comic as well, and it's a great read, looks great as well. Really enjoying it. Some creepy scenes as well and things. But which part of the story or which parts are you most proud of and excited for people to see in the comic book?
I very much like the actual appearance of Crow at the end of part 1, which I think fits nicely with the way the characters played.
Yeah, Mike mentioned that just before we started.
Yeah, just before he came on, I was saying how cool that was.
Because when you think about Hawk the Slayer, you associate certain visuals, but also certain sounds with the film. And one of the sounds is the noise of arrows being run through a bow very, very fast, and the sound of an automatic crossbow clicking away as it spits out its quarrels. That happens a lot in the movie. It's one of the film's kind of signature soundtrack moments. And that was something I thought, if I put that in, that will immediately let people know this is Hawk the Slayer. Beyond that, in the same vein, the great big cartoon hawk that appears at the start of the story and screams, the same introduction. This is a story of good versus evil. And broadly speaking, keeping the characters as constant as I can. You know, Hawk is stoic, thoughtful, doesn't give much away, broods a bit. His chum, played by Bernard Bresslaw, Gort the Giant, is a bit more expansive and also not quite comic relief, but not far off it. And so on. And of course, Voltan is evil beyond description, and chews up the scenery every chance he gets.
Very, very true to the character for sure in the film. You obviously have written in so many genres in your career, but fantasy is one that you've written in it before, but it's not something you go to all that often. I was
Right.
just curious if, like, is it a different challenge when you're writing in sort of the fantasy realm as opposed to some of the things like maybe the war comics or the superhero comics where you can probably just sort of slip into it a lot easier, or is it kind of just the same process as everything else?
When it came to Hawk, I decided I would approach it first and foremost as a Hawk the Slayer story, rather than thinking too hard about the sword and sorcery genre. That goes back to what I was saying about not expanding the world, not changing it into something unrecognizable. You're right, though. I really haven't written much sword and sorcery. It's something I liked as a kid. I'm still a huge fan of The Hobbit. I like the Slain strip in 2000 AD, certainly the
Oh
old
yeah, yeah.
white stuff. There's a few other bits and pieces here and there, but I think much like science fiction, I have very limited interest in the sword and sorcery genre because I feel it's an easy one for people to get lazy with,
Mm.
and to trot out familiar scenery, you might say.
Yeah.
A new sword and sorcery genre arises, and here's a bloke with a magic sword or a magic something, and here's his dwarvish or elfin sidekick. You see these things, and they really just repeat what's come before, and that might be one of the reasons I'm not terribly interested in it, because it's the same as my objection to superheroes. That feeling I get of the same thing over and over again, and that turns me off reading it, and that's why I've not written much of it.
Makes sense.
Okay. Well, there was a few years back, there was a Kickstarter to try and get a sequel to Hook the Slayer made, a movie. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out. I think it made half its target. But if they were going to make a sequel to based on your comic book, or just make it Hook the Slayer in general, when you're writing the book, any ideas on who'd be a good pick to play Hawk out of today's choice of actors? Or did you try and keep it out your head and just stick with John Terry?
I really did have John Terry in my head. Actually, I liked his performance. There's an element of the spaghetti western Clint Eastwood figure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The guy who doesn't give much away and who tends to let others reveal themselves so that he can then act. If there was a sequel, I don't know. It would be nice to see him in there somewhere, in some minor role, the way they take members of the original cast and use the sequels nowadays. Although who knows, but perhaps he's horribly embarrassed by the original and has long since disowned it. I don't know. I mean, I think you're talking about a sort of guy in his late 30s, early 40s, because Hawk's lived a bit. He's been away to wars and come back. For some reason, someone like Jake Gyllenhaal maybe comes to mind.
Okay, yeah.
It would be fun to have another guy with an American accent in a fairly obvious English Middle Ages setting.
Yeah.
Just the sheer incongruity of it. Voltan, the way I've written him in the story, almost anyone could play him, because you never see him as he was, except in flashbacks. So it's possible that with makeup and CGI and some good voice work, you could get something approximating the original. And after that, gosh, it's hard to say. I believe the actress who played the sorceress, the woman known only as Woman, I think she's still around, and that character's kind of ageless.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't know really. That's the kind of question I tend to blank on, just because I'm not necessarily aware of many actors and actresses in the way I used to be, just because I watch far less film and TV, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
Now, sorry, Phil, do you want to go ahead?
No, go on. I just had the last one.
I was going to say, so for the Hawk the Slayer comic, I've noticed it's 5-issue miniseries. Is there is it sort of dependent on how well the sales go? If there's gonna be more, are there plans to do more, or is it just kind of like, hey, I did my story and I'm done? You know, is there anything in the future down the line?
At the moment, I don't really know. I think I've gone as far as I can with it. I got it out of my system in one go.
Right.
That may change, but it was such a pleasure to write, and it was such a pleasure to finally get all those scenes out there, all those ideas that have been popping about in my head for so long, that I think I had a nice sense of completion with it. What Rebellion might do, if the book does well enough to do more, I'm not sure. I very much hope they keep Henry Flint on the book, because he is, of course, absolutely fantastic, and so is Staples with those covers.
Right, for sure.
Oh, so it's been a definite passion project by the sound of it. So it's going to be good to see how it finishes. So the first issue, it's still out. Is it the 13th of April?
I believe so. Yeah, it's running as a giveaway with the Judge Dredd magazine at the moment, but the first issue of the actual release will indeed be in April. Okay, yeah.
But if there's now you've done this one, got out your system, are there any other movies you'd like to do sequels to, like Crawl or something else? Or
well, I think that's probably me done with Sword and Sorcery, just for the reasons mentioned. I mean, there are other characters that come to mind, other movies that come to mind, but you do think of them and then find yourself asking, but what is there really? For instance, I'm a big Dirty Harry fan. But I don't have 5 issues worth of Dirty Harry ideas the way I did with Hawk, because I think probably because that original movie was so good, and there's not a lot you can add to it. It's the sort of steadily diminishing returns of the Dirty Harry sequels that give you those franchise ideas, and that's not necessarily a good reason to go ahead. Beyond that, I think most of the established characters that I want to write are probably in comics. They're probably things from Battle and possibly 2000 AD, things that people haven't really gone near for a long time, and that I would like to revive, rather than something that's well known and I just want to take my turn at.
Makes sense. Phil, you had some 2000 AD related questions. Actually, that seems like a nice segue. Do you want to jump ahead to those, and I'll come back to my
question. So where have they gone? Where have they gone? Yes, so it's 2000 AD. It's celebrating its 45th anniversary, isn't it? Yeah. So, but how did you feel back in the day when you landed that gig to write Judge Dredd? What was it to get that? You know, because that's a big character.
Yeah. It was tremendous. Of course, I was actually talking about this on an interview the other day, a Zoom panel for the 45th anniversary, along with some people who worked on Crisis, which of course was my part of the kind of 2000 AD world at the time. And it was tremendous. I mean, within a year of starting to write comics, I had Judge Dredd and Hellblazer, which was, for me, for a 20-year-old, absolutely amazing. It was, of course, too much too soon, and I didn't do a very good job in either, but there's no doubt that at the time it was tremendous, and I was hugely grateful to John Wagner for giving me the opportunity.
I try to make it a point not to argue with our guests ever, but I do have to contradict you on one thing that you said, which is that you said you didn't do a very good job on them. So I have to just quickly tell you. So I've long considered myself a Hellblazer fan, a John Constantine fan, and I always try to pick up his new series, and I always read them for a couple issues, and I don't really like them. And I had an epiphany maybe a year or two ago when I realized I'm not really a John Constantine fan. I'm a Garth Ennis John Constantine fan. Your run on Hellblazer is one of my favorite comic runs ever, and that's I can't ever read Constantine anymore because nothing ever lives up to your run on that book. So just had to say, I appreciate that. I appreciate your perspective is different from mine, but that's one of the greats in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate you saying it. I mean, to me, the character created by Alan Moore and then developed by Jamie Delano was a hard one to go wrong with, and I did eventually get it right. I feel that the second half of the run, from the point when coincidentally Steve Dillon comes on as regular artist. He'd done a few fill-ins, but he came on as regular artist kind of at the moment where something went click for me.
Hmm.
And from there to the rest to the end of the run is not bad stuff. And of course that set me off down the road to Preacher, and the rest again is history.
Right.
I think when I look back on my work on Hellblazer, whether it's the sort of good or not so good half, my critique of it would be that it's a bit too sentimental for that character, maybe a bit too heroic for that character. He's too not nice, but decent a guy. And ultimately, you are talking about someone who gathers people up and then uses them, who plays them like cards. And sometimes that doesn't work out too well for them. So maybe something a little more cynical.
Right.
That's what I have in mind when I think about what I should have been aiming for. Of course, what they're doing with the character at the moment is kind of like what Marvel are doing with the Punisher. You know, other real world character is they're just trying everything they can until something sticks, because they're completely certain what they've got.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. I mean, that probably is why I like it so much. You know, people who listen to the show will know I'm the sentimental, sappy one of the two of us. I like the happy endings. You know, I like the romance and the sunshine and stuff. So it makes perfect sense then that, you know, if you think that your run on Hellblazer was a little too, you know, not as cynical as it could have been, that's probably why I loved it so much.
Very, very possibly. It is more like traditional, conventional comic book writing than perhaps that title needs.
Right. Well, I still love
Yeah,
it.
it's still a great run. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I did like your work on Judge Dredd as well, but
but,
you're always your own worst critic, aren't you? That's usually the way it is.
I think you have to be your own harshest critic, but ultimately, if you like it, that's all that matters. This is something I find again and again. We all have those films and comic books and TV shows and novels that we love, and we don't really care. Maybe they're universally denigrated. Maybe the actual original creators have disowned them, but we don't care because we love it. This sort of neatly takes us back to Hawk the Slayer.
Yeah.
It really does.
You mentioned there as well, though, but when Steve Dillon came on board as a regular, it just seemed to click. Do you find that often when writing comics where you get the right artist with it, it just elevates it all? It just like becomes like a feedback loop?
Yeah, more and more, to be honest with you. These days, it's very rare that I would begin working with a new artist and I think this just isn't working. That happens very rarely. For a long time recently, I didn't work with any new artists at all. I had a sort of rotating team almost. People like Russ Braun and John McCrae and Peter Schneeberg and PJ Holden. And it's only recently I've worked with a couple of new people, people like Steve Epting, where we clicked straight away on Sarah and did one of the best things I've ever done. Chris Burnham has drawn a strip for the Battle Action special, and that was another instant click. He was a revelation, actually. His storytelling, character movement, all of it is absolutely wonderful. I think it's going to be a treat for people to see that. But that's a very pleasant thing to happen when you start working with someone for the first time and you haven't seen the pages yet and you're crossing your fingers and think, I hope they get it. And then in it comes and it's like, wow, they got it. They nailed it.
I just have to, I'll quickly just do a little tiny name drop. I'm happy to say I've been friends with Russ Braun for about 25 years, actually. So he was, I've known him for a long time. So when I see him at the cons and you guys are always chatting and stuff, it's always fun. So he did a cover for my own comic that I write. He did a cover for me actually just a few months ago. So I always enjoy seeing the two of you guys working together. Your guys' stuff is always brilliant. So.
Oh, good. Well, there's a new series of Jimmy's Bastards.
Oh, yes.
Russ is about a third of the way through drawing, and that should be appearing latter half of the year.
Excellent. I love the first Jimmy's Bastards was fantastic. So that was great stuff.
I think this one is twice as good.
Actually. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So that leads me to sort of an interesting question with your kind of, you know, body of work at large. You know, if I was to think back, you know, over the last 20, 30 years and think like, what are two of the comic books that I think would never get translated into a mainstream Hollywood TV show? I think Preacher and The Boys would probably be pretty near the top of that list, and yet both of them did exactly that. So were you as surprised as I think some of us were that like Hollywood came calling and picked these particular projects to turn into, you know, mainstream shows?
Well, The Boys happened because of Preacher.
Okay.
Because that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg had made enough of a success of Preacher that people were willing to consider their next offer. And The Boys worked, as I say, off the back of Preacher, but also I think The Boys works because it is such an incredibly simple concept. You can do it in one line. Superheroes are bastards. They need a slap, and these are the boys who are going to do it, and that's it.
Right.
And with the other thing that helps, of course, is that with the success of superhero films and TV shows over the past 10, 15 years, and with the mainstream audience, the mainstream public being educated to the notion of shared universes where it's not just one, it's not just Spider-Man. If you're walking down the street, you might see him swing past, and then you might see the Hulk come crashing through the side of a building, and then Iron Man might appear to fight him, and there are villains, and they're all in the same world. And I think once that mainstream audience was educated to that idea of worlds of superheroes, that meant the time was ripe for The Boys. A team who live and work in an entire world of superheroes. So really, you know, that was optimum timing. That couldn't have worked out better.
Well, we've got season 3 of The Boys is coming out on the 3rd of June, but there's also the animated show, isn't there? The Boys Presents Diabolical.
That's right.
I think that's the 4th of March. And I was glad to see there's one of these, because it's an anthology show. I was glad to see one of the episodes. It's based on the artwork from the comic books by Derek Robertson. So I'm made up to see that. But so you've written an episode. Is it called "I'm Your Pusher"?
That's right. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that? Is that?
Sure. I can tell you that it's about a chap who is known as the drug dealer to the superhuman community. It's just that he's not supposed to be known as that, and how Butcher found out is a matter of some concern for the poor guy, because Butcher, of course, intends to put the screws to him and keep turning them until he screams. The notion of getting your hands on the supply of drugs to various superhero characters is one that Butcher, of course, embraces wholly, because it means he can spike the drugs, he can get awful things in there, and he can cause those superheroes to do awful things. So that fits his agenda down to the ground. So that's what my story is about, and it worked out great. It was lovely to see Simon Pegg actually pop up and voice Huey, what with his long-standing and strange connection to the character, and it was wonderful to see the characters from the comic with Butcher and Terror appearing and so on. So that was a real treat.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask as well, on a scale of Alan Moore to 10, how do you feel about watching adaptations of your work?
Well, I would almost divide it up, not just show by show, but episode by episode. I don't, to be honest, I don't really tend to think in those terms. I tend to see the two as separate.
Okay.
And the purpose of the show ultimately to spread the word about the book. That's the nice thing, in both cases, Preacher and The Boys, they have both done very, very well off the backs of their adaptations, and that's good for me because it means that my stories aren't going away.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Are you consulted about, like, I mean, obviously they have to change a lot of stuff for TV. Are you consulted about like changes, new characters, things like that? Or do you just sort of sign off on it and let them, do what they want with it? Or do you have any kind of, input on that?
Pretty much the latter. As I say, I am content for the two to be separate. To me, as I say, there's the benefit to the sales of the books, but also it frees me up to work on things that I really enjoy. The Boys is 15 years in my rear view now, Preacher 25.
Mhm.
And while I'm terribly fond of both of them, my interests now lie in other directions.
Sure.
Being able to do Hawk the Slayer, being able to do a lot of creator-owned war stories like The Lion and the Eagle, which is currently running, or Out of the Blue, or The String Bags, which appeared recently. Also being able to do things for Rebellion, like the Battle Action Special, which is going to be out this summer, the one I mentioned.
Mhm.
With the success of the shows frees me up to do this, and that is what I see as their other main benefit, along with the continued success of the books.
Makes sense. And you also wrote recently just came out was the Peacemaker one shot for DC's Black Label. Is that how did that kind of come about? Were you constrained by the TV show at all? Was it something you pursued, or did they come to you?
They came to me after I mentioned to Marie Javins, who's an old friend, that I had always thought the Peacemaker had a different kind of potential to the way it's used by DC. I think what you have is a very cool name, and in a way, a kind of a Punisher-esque character. I think what I said to Marie was, I've never understood why they don't just dress him in black, give him a gun, get rid of the bucket on his head, and they've got DC's Punisher franchise.
Right.
And she remembered that, and had editor Katie Kubert get in touch with me about it. And really what I wanted to do was, as I say, create a kind of a Punisher for DC, but one who was still in the military, and one who fulfilled a kind of a Punisher function for the US military, with someone who would deal with the wrongdoing that goes on within the Army, the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, the things that no one really wants to admit to, but have to be swept away, blown away, in fact. Little things that have to be taken care of. And I thought, well, given that this guy is driven to do this sort of stuff anyway, that would be an excellent direction for them to kind of employ him in. And that was my take on the Peacemaker.
So when you write a story like that, or like Hawk Slayer, for example, where you are working with, pre-existing characters who you did not create, have there been, or do you come across constraints where you kind of throw stuff out there and they come back to you, like Rebellion comes back to you with Hawk, or DC comes back to you and says, no, we don't want to go that direction, change it? Or do they pretty much at this point, you're Garth Ennis, they just kind of give you free reign and run with what you go with?
Generally, yeah, they know what they're going to get, so they go with it.
Right.
On the other hand, occasionally there will be something, but for the most part, yes, they're happy for me to do what I'm going to do. They wouldn't really have hired me otherwise. I compare and contrast. If I go back to writing Hitman in the 90s, which was a character created by myself and John McCrae in a setting with a cast that we'd come up with ourselves, but that was set in the DC universe, an odd corner of it, and where you occasionally had DC characters showing up. And just for fun, I would maybe put those DC characters through the ringer a bit. People might
certainly did.
Green Lantern appearance or the Batman appearance. And there were times there where people would say to me, you're going a bit far here. This is adding insult to injury, and so on. And that was all right. They're not my characters, and I understand I am and did really, but I am getting away with murder when I do that stuff. What was interesting was that about 5 or 10 years after that, when I was writing about 5 years, when I was writing the first series of The Punisher for Marvel, the one I did before the Max book, and with that, I took him out of the Marvel universe entirely. But with the one before that, the goofier one, I did the same thing with Marvel characters showing up and being, well, getting a hard time of it. And I can remember that things had changed a bit because some Marvel editors did object to that. But editor-in-chief Joe Quesada was happy to say, look, we knew what we were going to get, and this isn't going to harm the sales. It's not going to stop anyone from reading those characters. It's funny. It's a different take on it. Let's just do it. And so he would sign off on this stuff, and it would ultimately happen. And so there was that subtle change from Hitman. And then if we fast forward again to the present day, well, that sort of stuff just isn't really an issue at all.
Right. Phil, I'm going to go one more, and then I'll let you have a question. Since you brought up Hitman, Garth, one of my favorite comic series of all time. Absolutely a humongous fan. I just reread the whole series again like a year or two ago when they put all the trades out. I reread the entire thing. Obviously, the ending of the series, without going to any real spoilers, people haven't read it yet, doesn't really leave for much in the way of, future sequels or anything. But is there anything on the horizon as far as comics or movies or TV shows or anything that you know of with Hitman? Are we going to see ever more of Tommy in the future, do you think? Or is that kind of, you've said your piece? And
outside comics, there has been steady interest, but it's gone nowhere.
Okay.
In comics, there's also been a degree of interest. I mean, I've heard occasionally from people from DC who tell me there's someone who would like to bring Hitman back, raise him from the dead, whatever. And they asked me about this purely because of the weird nature of the contract that Tommy was created under. Because we were all, at the time, we were all creating these new characters for DC.
Right.
Effectively handing them the IP. There was a sort of nod towards creators' rights where John McCrae, the artist, and I would share 5% or something like that. And I think in the contract it says that whether to be a new Hitman, they do at least have to give John and I first refusal at doing it. And anyway, when I'm asked about this, my line is always, well, what does it get you?
Right.
Bringing Tommy back, what does it really get you? And although, at that point, that's my input, and I can't really say yes or no beyond that, I have no power of veto. That question does seem to have stopped them from going any further for the time being.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
As you know, as you probably know, I've revisited it from time to time, or at least I've revisited that world. I had the 6-pack series, Dog Warrior series. I would like to drop into Noonan's bar occasionally and just do 10, 20 pages of something.
Sure.
I've always wanted to do the secret origin of Baitor.
Yeah.
I've got that rolling around in my head. There'll always be something like that. It is a weird, quirky little corner of Gotham City that I do enjoy. I do enjoy visiting. Beyond that, your guess is as good as mine. If there's a new Hitman comic next year or a Hitman TV show in 2 years, well, you'll know I was wrong.
Well, if there's a Hitman comic and you're not involved, I'm not interested. But hopefully, you'll, like you said, you can drop in from time to time at least. So
that'd be good though, like an anthology of Noonan's bar. It'd be like I've been rereading Spider Robertson's Callahan's Cross Time Taverns, which all set in the same bar, but it's all different stories coming in. That'd be cool to go. But are there any of your other stories, comic books, in talks about being adapted for TV or film after the success of Preaching?
There's a couple of things I can't really talk about. But as I said of Hitman, there's been constant interest. It's just that nothing's gone the distance. The rights the options have sold on a couple of things and then reverted. A Walk Through Hell, for instance. There was the option on that was sold. Likewise, Pride and Joy. There's been interest in things like Caliban, Red Team, Jimmy's Bastards. Beyond that, I've had phone calls with people about a good half of my output, but you become aware after a while that there's something of a scattershot approach going on here, and that most of them are unlikely to happen. It just so happens that the two big ones that did, Preacher and especially The Boy, took off in fine style.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, what's the because we've got the animated spin-off, Diabolical, but there's also that won the live action spin off in a college for superheroes. How's
Yes,
that developing? Is that still going ahead?
That proceeds apace. I tend not to worry about the nitty gritty of these, and really just enjoy them when they come out, for some of the reasons I've already said. But yes, I believe that's continuing its development at the moment.
That's good to know.
So switching gears just a little bit, I'm gonna ask you a little bit about the fans and the convention experience. And I know you're a fixture at a lot of the conventions, or at least especially pre-COVID times. Although I think I saw you at Baltimore this year, last year. But I like to tell my little story. A couple of years ago at Baltimore, this is a picture. There's you and me, Garth, at the bar. We were and we interacted for about 12 seconds when this happened. We were my buddies and I in the picture there. We're sitting at the bar, and you were next to us, and your friend who you were with, whose name I don't remember.
Probably Joe Rybant, big fella.
Yeah, that's him. Yep.
Yeah,
so you had gone up, I think, to use the restroom or something, and so Joe heard us talking about comics, and he was like, oh, you guys are here for the convention. We were like, yeah. He's like, do you know that was Garth Ennis sitting right next to you? And we were like, yeah, we did know that was Garth, actually, but we don't want to bother you. You're at the bar. It's it was like 10 o'clock at night. So when you came back, Joe was like, Garth, these guys are fans. Take a picture. And so we snapped this real quick, and then you went back to having your drink. But I just wanted to tell that story because I enjoy it. But my question for you is, what do you enjoy? I mean, do you enjoy interacting with the fans? What's the best part of interacting with the fans, going to the conventions? What's that like for you? I know your lines get pretty hectic. So, how is that experience for you?
I enjoy it. And I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy, answering their questions about stuff, about what's coming up and so on. Panels are good for that, but the signings are nice where you actually get to meet people. I will actually be at the Kansas City Con at the end of April, if that's still on, I believe, and I'll probably be at Baltimore this year just because that's such a nice one to do. Such a nice town. The con's not too big, not too small, just right somehow. I remember, speaking of Joe, actually, he had a nasty habit for a while when we worked at convention bars or whatever, of telling people sotto voce, but not really, while jerking a thumb at me, going, he's kind of a big deal. You bastard. Which I think is that line from the Will Ferrell thing where he's a reporter. Isn't that it?
Which one is that?
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he likes to tell people he's kind of a big deal. Well, that was Joe's line to wind me.
Right. That's funny. That sounds about similar to what my experience with him was. Except that we actually knew who you were at that point, so he just got to to show off that he was hanging out with you. But yeah, well, that's cool. It's always good to meet people at the cons, the creators and stuff.
I do enjoy it. It is nice. I mean, as you probably know, I have no social media presence. I tend to avoid that end of things. I'd rather meet people. A little harder with the way the world it is at the moment, but last couple of cons I've gone to have been great. Chicago in December and then Baltimore a couple of months before went great.
Absolutely. Phil,
yes. So what kind of what other comics, not your own stuff, what other comics have you been reading recently that have been hitting the spot for you?
Well, recently, actually, what with the 45th anniversary and so on, I've been rereading a lot of the classic 2000 stuff, going right back to the beginning and enjoying the collected editions of things like Harlem Heroes and Mach 1 and Dan Dare, Dredd, Invasion, and in particular Flesh, which was really the moment I fell in love with comics as a kid. Flesh, if you don't know this, Mike, was a strip about cowboys from the 23rd century going back in time to hunt dinosaurs because in the 23rd century the world had run out of meat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that one.
That's not what I'm familiar with. I'm a pretty good 2000 AD fan. I've read a lot of Judge Dredd stuff, but I've read a lot of there are other things here and there too. But that's not one I can say I'm familiar with. So I have to track
this goes right back to the first issue.
Wow.
And I think the reasoning was that given that the dinosaurs were going extinct anyway, why not go back and hunt them for their meat? No one seems to have said, well, wait a minute, could that have been the reason they went extinct? What you end up with is a kind of a war between dinosaurs and cowboys, because the big meat eaters, the predators, slowly realize that these weird little pink apes are taking away their food source, the plant eaters. And so the tyrannosaurs and the velociraptors, or terrible claws as they're called in the story, and the spinosaurs and the furry tyrannosaurs, and all the other big meat-eating dinosaurs descend on what's called the trans-time base in the late Cretaceous. Intending on it's essentially, you know, man versus dinosaur, and one shall walk away. And hijinks ensue, I can tell you, because in those days there was almost a contest each issue to see how many people could fall into the mouths of these things and get chewed up, heads flying all over the place. It was de rigueur for the era, and that, I think, was where I fell in love with comics, and that's what I've been revisiting recently. Apart from that, with the Battle Action Special, I've been reading a load of old Battle stuff, and I still do check in with 2000 AD with Judge Dredd when John Wagner's working on it.
Yeah,
and beyond that, I see Saga's back, so I'll be reading collected editions again. I know that Brian Vaughan is seething with jealousy and resentment now that Hawk the Slayer has knocked Saga off the sword and sorcery throne. So I'm particularly proud of that.
Just a quick follow up on that. With this Flesh story you mentioned that I wasn't that familiar with, it sounds to me like it just popped in my head when you were telling me about that. Did your Hitman couple of issues, the dinosaurs in it, was that sort of a tribute / unofficial sequel to that story?
Very much a tribute. That kind of incredibly hyperbolic narration. That is something that marked Flesh and its ilk. There was another strip, Shaco, about a giant killer polar bear. There was another one in another comic, a similar comic to 2000 AD, called Hookjaw, about a killer shark.
Hookjaw, I love Hookjaw. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the narration helped to kind of personify the monsters.
Yeah.
There's an interesting sort of over the top aspect of this. It's stuff like the little human screams excited her, she bit deep, stuff like that. And that's something I tried to capture in Hitman.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff, you know, when it goes in at that age 7, it's not coming out.
Yeah. So many good things in those old 2000 ADs and Battle.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
How about so there's some comics that you're reading. How about like movies and TV shows? I know you said you're watching less of it now, but what about what some, you know, for fans who know your work? I know you from what I've read and talked to you. I think you're big into like westerns and war movies and stuff. Are there any favorites that you like to go back to? Movies, obviously Hawk the Slayer, but any others that are favorites of yours?
Yeah, there are always favorites. You know, westerns like Unforgiven and The Outlaw Josie Wales and The Cowboys. War movies like Kelly's Heroes and A Bridge Too Far and The Battle of Britain. And there's things like Alien and Predator and Terminator and Blade Runner, you know. Currently, I'm really enjoying a Korean zombie series on Netflix called All of Us Are Dead.
I just finished that the other night. It's really good. Yeah.
Good. I've got 3 episodes to go. I'm really enjoying it. I thought The White Lotus was brilliant. I loved that. There's a British show called Ghosts, which I thought was very funny indeed.
We're watching the American version right now because that was our first. And then I realized it was based on a British show, so now we have to go back and watch the original. But we're enjoying that sort of as well.
Yeah, that was great. And movies, there's been some good stuff. I saw a decent Western recently called Old Henry. It looks really good. The plot doesn't quite work, but there's a sort of rather audacious twist most of the way through it that I was impressed by. Probably the movie I've most enjoyed in the last couple of years is a Mads Mikkelsen called Riders of Justice.
Oh, that's a really good film. I like that.
that's a tremendous film. You watch the trailer and you think, okay, it's a revenge flick, it's an action flick, and it is, but it's something else entirely. It's, in a way, it's like nothing you've ever seen before. I like Mads Mikkelsen anyway, but that one really blew me away. Yeah, probably my favorite movie of lockdown, really.
Very
yeah, that
cool.
was in my top 10 of last year. That film.
That's right. That's
Very
right.
good. Yeah,
Terrific film.
Very good. All right. Well, Garth, I know we're starting to run out of time and we don't want to keep you too long, but we do have, if you're game, we like to do a little lightning round where we've got kind of like 10 like either or questions, and you kind of have to like just,
Okay.
are you game for that?
Sure. I'm probably not going to be very good at it, but
It's not too. I try to keep it easy. It's just you pick whichever one you like better, basically.
okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Beatles
Beatles
or
or the Rolling Stones?
Oh, sorry, Phil.
Yeah.
Beatles.
Good, right answer. Superman or Batman?
I don't know. You know, having written both, they're both fun to write. Put it that way. Most wrong fun to write, Batman. Nobility and getting your Jesus Christ fan fiction out of your system, Superman.
Okay. Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, or Freddy Krueger?
Oh God, don't really care about any of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's fair. Captain Kirk or Captain Picard?
Again, don't really care.
All right.
Oh, no. Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter?
Lord of the Rings.
Dick Sargent or Dick York?
Don't know what those are.
That's from Bewitched. I thought I'd throw in a curveball.
Single issues or trade paperbacks?
Trade paperbacks.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No.
Okay. And the big one, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Yes or no?
Hell, again, I'm not a big enough fan to worry about it. I mean, I'll watch it if it's on.
You complete the fifth.
Yeah, I'll plead the Last Boy Scout. How's that?
That's
okay.
a movie, though.
Good, yeah.
All right.
Movie I enjoy a lot more.
Excellent. All right. So two last questions. First of all, is there anything else coming up that fans should know about? Obviously, Hawk the Slayer is coming out in April. You mentioned a couple other things, the battle actions. Is there anything else you want fans to know about, or anything you want to say about Hawk the Slayer? Why people should read it if they're not fans of the movie, or anything like that?
Hawk is running at the minute. I'm my own worst self-publicist, so read it or don't. But I think you will enjoy it. I think if you like sword and sorcery and you like a bit of quirk and you like, you know, one eye winking slightly at the audience without making fun of the whole thing, then I think you might like Hawk the Slayer. I also have a war book out at the minute. I think I mentioned it, The Lion and the Eagle with PJ Holden. That's a very brutal jungle warfare story. Battle action in June. And beyond that, should be a Punisher book towards the end of the year. Art by Jason Burrows, a Vietnam story with Nick Fury.
Excellent.
There'll be a new series, kind of not a follow-up, but a story set in the same world as Sarah, with art by Steve Epting again. That's called Partisan. That will hopefully be the second of what will be a trilogy eventually, 3 separate but vaguely connected stories.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, and more Jimmy's Bastards, which I mentioned, I'm just finishing up a new horror book that will probably be out next year.
Cool. You're a busy guy, clearly.
Always. Yeah.
All sounds good.
All right.
And the last question, what would your final words be if you were a character in a horror movie and the monster had just got you?
Oh boy. Probably, you know, I was talking to some friends about this recently. They were saying, who are you in Alien?
Okay, yeah.
You know, are you screaming your head off like Lambert? Do you go after it and then lose your nerve like Dallas? And I reckon I'm Brett. I think I just freeze up and stare at the fucker while it kills me. I think that's probably the best I can manage.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I'm definitely not Parker.
That's good. That's good. That's great. All right. Well, that is going to start to wrap us up then. So, Garth, let us just both say thank you so much for being here. We're super excited to talk to you. Very excited for Hawk the Slayer. Love the first 2 issues that we've read, and hopefully everybody will pick it up and make it a big success. Phil, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you. Really enjoyed it. It's been a good laugh. But Hawk the Slayer, the first issue's out on the 13th of April, and it's good. It's worth picking up if you get the chance.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. I really enjoyed this. Cheers.
Thank you, Garth. Thank you, Garth. Take care. All right, that's going to wrap us up, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. I'm Mike Spring.
And I'm Phil Edwards.
And we'll see you next time.
After the ending.